we really putting them on trial?
No, we are not really putting them on trial. When you're done, burn the bodies. It's faster.
Hello, and welcome to our The Last of Us HBO Spoilercast, where each week we'll be reacting to the latest episode and talking in depth about what we've watched. I'm Phil, or AK Black and Red, and on this channel I talk about The Last of Us a lot, along with other survival and horror-themed video games. So if that's your thing, then be sure to subscribe. This week I am joined by Dee, who, aside from being my wife, is a slam poet, sex blogger, and PhD researcher, and who regular viewers of this channel may remember from when she built me a Resident Evil-themed Animal Crossing island. And Will, who is my co-host for the Horror Game of the Year Awards, where we've just announced the winner to big fanfare, as well as the admin of the Resident Evil Central accounts on Twitter, which is the largest Resident Evil fan account. And as the name implies, spoilers lie ahead for the 5th episode of the HBO series, so if you haven't watched it yet, then I highly recommend you do so before proceeding. You don't have to have played the game to be able to follow along, although be aware that we will be talking about elements of the game where they echo what's happened in the show or diverge from them. So there will be spoilers for the game up to the point of where the TV show has reached. With all that out the way, let's dive in. So first off, we're going to start with general impressions of the episode, what we thought of it, our general review, and anything in particular you want to talk about just overall. So, Dee, do you want to go first?
We watched it early. We didn't watch it on the Monday. We watched it early because of the Super Bowl thing, meaning we could watch it early. And if that happens again, we're not to do that, babe, because I had not had enough time to put myself together again from the previous episode before this one came along and broke me all over again. Luckily, we're not seeing the next one till next week, but good Lord, it was terrifying and wonderful. And all I'm going to say right now is that if my kids were clickers, there is no way they would be doing anything but sitting on a sofa going click, 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 and trying to communicate to me that they wanted a cup of tea in Morse code. They certainly wouldn't be doing gymnastics in a truck.
Oh, God.
I've just got this image in my head now of like sort of surly teenagers, but clickers who sort of go, oh, don't want to. And the clicker mum going, come on, you've got to. Eat your humans, don't push them around the plate.
Wait till your bloated dad gets home. No, it was fantastic as ever. Cannot fault it.
Yeah, and we were saying before we started recording, your kind of view on this is you've seen what happens in the game because you've seen me play it, but you've not played it, or your playthrough is very early stages.
My playthrough is very, very early stages. As in, at one point, Phil had to say, "Are you okay? Do you need a break?" Because it was not because it was scary. I don't do scared, but I do immersion very well, and I was so immersed, and everything was so intense, and that's been exactly the same with the program. It's as Phil says, I haven't played the whole game yet, but neither am I coming to the program absolutely oblivious to what goes on because I've seen Phil play it time and time again. So I'm there noticing the Easter eggs and going, oh, he said the thing. And but still having forgotten certain bits. I'd forgotten all about Kathleen. It's worse than the time I forgot about Dre, but I had totally forgotten about Kathleen.
Well, I mean, you'll be glad to know that you didn't, because she's an original character for the show.
Oh, well, there you go.
You don't have to worry about having missed something. Like,
I felt terrible.
Oh
Oh,
god.
there you go. What about you, Will? What were your overall first impressions?
I'm on the same boat really. Like my heart's been smashed into smithereens. I've got no more tears left. It's
Ah,
it's been as you said, it was a very beautiful episode at points. Especially with all the relationships that have been built up really well, and then it's just right back down, smashed into smithereens
yeah.
again. But it's no, it was an absolutely. I'm going to say probably the best episode of the season so far. Just in, it had a bit of everything. It had a bit of
Yeah.
the emotional development. It had all the action at the very end, and everything else, and all the huge, big waves throughout the episode. But yeah,
That emotional connection was not any more strong than when Ellie was going to rescue Sam, because
Yeah.
she looked up at that window and then she's like, Joel is there, he has got my back, and that trust as she went in and out knowing he would be picking them off.
Mm.
Broke me.
Yeah. So any more general thoughts there? Well, before I take my kind of verdict on it as well, or is that
No,
gonna cover it?
you go for it. I think. Yeah.
So many thoughts, but
Yeah.
we've got
Yeah. Well,
time, so carry
we'll
on.
have time to do more thoughts in depth on in different bits, but yeah, I mean, like yourselves, overall, I think this was probably the peak at the show at this point, and I think one of the things it's highlighting what it does really well in terms of a game adaptation as well. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but it takes the things from the game in terms of it's obviously adapting the story and you're getting the main story beats, but you're also, when it's adapting the monsters, it makes them feel real in a way that a lot of other video game adaptations like Resident Evil and stuff don't, because they kind of, even when the films are quite okay, like they overload these things and sort of trying to give you that video gamey action and that constant sort of sense of being in the middle of it. Whereas when you're playing the Last of Us game and you're going through like how many clickers and bloaters and all that sort of stuff, and there's lots of them, that feels tense because you're playing it and you can die at any moment. Whereas with this, the fact that that would be unrealistic and kind of make them feel over macho, too much of like sort of, basically almost superheroes. Instead, these things can, are terrifying, and people like, grown, experienced men are like running in terror, and these sorts of things makes those moments where they all burst out of the ground just that much more effective. And you just have that moment from sort of the tension pops, everything explodes on the screen, and it just, yeah.
That tension was built up right from the beginning, because when they're going through Kansas City, like, it was like you were playing the game. You were going from one building and hiding, and then running across to another building, and okay, we'll try and get up the stairs. It's blocked. Which way are we going? And it felt like watching you play the game.
Mm.
So that tension was building up right from the get-go.
But yeah, I think that kind of highlight, like, it's doing those things really well because it's not doing them in a video gamey sort of way, and it feels like, rather than just being they put a video game on telly and it's ridiculous, it feels like they've taken this story and they've taken the essence of it in terms of not just the character emotion but the horror and intensity and all that sort of stuff, and translated it, because that's, I think, effectively what people forget about these things. It's not just a case of taking it from one place and putting it in another place. You're translating something as much as you might be if you were taking something from English and translating it into Russian or whatever. You've got to sort of not just get the technical things right, you've got to get the kind of the flow of it. It's got to fit.
Yeah, you've got to get the context to work in the right places.
Yeah,
do translating poems, and I translate poems into French, and when we do that, we're trying to find words in from the French into English rather, and we're trying to find words that come originally from the French, so that gives it more of a feel of it, and I think that's what they've done really well in this. They've kept the feel of it really well, because it was obvious they weren't playing a video game, but it also looked so much and felt so much with the intensity, like you could have been sat there with a controller in your hand trying to move Joel and Ellie around the place. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that, I think let's kind of start talking more in depth because there were a lot of things to talk about in this episode. So, kind of a brief recap because we had episode 4 ended on a cliffhanger because we had Joel and Ellie arrive in Kansas City only to be ambushed by the hostile locals and that kind of initial confrontation before they escaped. And then we find out that their leader, Kathleen, was on the hunt for everyone who's collaborated with Fedra, who they've recently ousted. And in particular, they're looking for someone called Henry, who we know is who's looking after his younger brother, Sam. And the episode ended with Henry and Sam holding Joel and Ellie at gunpoint. And then before we pick that up, episode 5, we rush back. Rush is the wrong word. We go backwards to the point at which the overthrow of Fedra is happening, which is different from the games because in the games when they go into Pittsburgh, it's a ruined city that's been abandoned by the military many years prior, and they've descended into this level of savagery. So this is kind of these hunters are fresh. They're kind of freshly victorious and still on that kind of euphoria because they're only a few weeks in. But then we kind of see Henry and Sam introduced as they're trying to make their way away because we see all this chaos. We've got the Federal soldiers being hanged and all this sort of thing. And one of the first things that we notice, obviously, is that Sam is deaf as well, which is two kind of major departures from the game in terms of Sam's age because he's younger than he was in the game, and he's only 8 years old at this point, and he's also deaf as well, which means that this world around him has got to be that much scarier, I think, as well. And yeah, so I mean, let's start from there and kind of like see where conversation takes us. But what were your thoughts on kind of what we've been thrown into there and how we're introduced to Henry and Sam properly?
I think it was a really good idea to introduce the Sam being deaf because obviously disabilities aren't very much shown in TV shows too much, especially in end of the world sort of survival type TV shows, and also in the world of The Last of Us where sound is such a key issue of survival. Having that complete vapor of no sound at all makes yourself such a huge don't even know what the right word is. Problem's the wrong word, but it's especially that one moment where they're trying to creep, where it shows where they're trying to creep through over the glass, and he keeps knocking the glass over because he can't hear it. It creates those really big moments of tension, especially for Henry. It's not just thinking about himself; he's got to think about Sam at every moment.
Yeah, I felt the same about this. I thought that actually the idea that he has to be Sam's ears because the danger is so sound based, it is so aural that that would mean that he is the one who has to protect Sam because on his own he wouldn't survive.
No.
He just absolutely wouldn't. And I think all the way through we've had themes of we're that kind of guy. In the Bill and Frank episode, Bill spelt it out and hung a lampshade on it, and I was so happy they did. Like, we're the protectors. And so we've got Bill, we've got Joel, and now we've got Henry, who is the protector and has to be the protector, and they define themselves by that. And I think that's really interesting. And you're right about I was so happy to see that Sam was, I mean, younger I could have dealt with or not, but I think it's really clever to have him as 8 years old as well, because had he been the same age as Ellie, they'd have been shipped. From the get-go, it'd have been, oh, Sam and Ellie, oh yeah, we should have them together, we ship them. And you know what the internet's like, they'd have shipped them. The fact that this was a small child meant they couldn't do that, because we then don't have to find out about Ellie, spoilers, until we get to the Left Behind bit where it'll all become apparent. But that, having him younger, means there was never any attraction there. They were just two kids enjoying each other's company. And the fact of having him deaf It was not just great representation for disabled people and deaf people, but it added that extra layer to Henry being a protector.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see as well, like as part of this, because Henry changes as a result of this, whereas the Henry of the games is still in that same sense. He's Sam's protector, but he's also, I suppose, a lot more a stern protector in some similar ways to Joel. He berates him over taking the toy and all this sort of stuff, whereas he's a lot softer with Sam in the show. But that also feeds into part of the things that we like after kind of they finally catch up with Joel and Ellie, and they start to talk, and they have the kind of the ice break starts to thaw between them over that like initial distrust, which I think we should come back into and talk about in a minute as well, because I think there's stuff there. But on Henry specifically, like we also find out that this version of Henry's a lot less comfortable with violence. I mean, he's racked with guilt over what he's done, even though the person he did it to is now trying to kill him and doing all this sort of stuff. But he's also, like he said, he's never killed people. Like the closest he's ever got to violence is pointing an unloaded gun at Ellie.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, as well, something that's very unusual to see in that sort of situation.
He's a lot more optimistic as well in the program, isn't he? He's very much like, okay, we've done this bit, it's great. It's like, no, mate, no.
I think it's also a realistic point of view of if the real world, like the world that we're in, it happens. I think a lot of people would put a front on. I don't think people aren't that innate to be that violent. And I think, especially when we're at that point of being survival, I don't think many people would do that kind of thing where they would just go slaughter people just for the sake of it. And I think they would just save the violence, obviously, for saving those closest to them.
Yeah, I mean, me and Phil, we discussed our zombie survival plan on our first date. So it's always, that's a true story. We really did. So we've always known that I would be the one with the guns. One of the reasons they fell in love with me is because I can drive a lorry and shoot a shotgun. So yeah. But yeah, Phil wouldn't be very good, I don't think. I mean, I think you'd be good at not planning things and what have you. Just doing everything by your wife. I think I would be the one who was more violent, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. I know who to watch then. That's fine.
I know, it'll be fine. I'll be driving up to where you are, going, get in the lorry, which is great. We've got a plan. But yeah, I think there are different types of people, and you're right. Most people, the sort of violence that you'd have to enact in an apocalypse would be abhorrent to them.
Yeah.
Right. People insist on having conversations kept civil. I mean, can you imagine? Like the tone police to be out there with the clickers going,
oh no.
But we've got a thing as well, like kind of this feeds into what Henry's done, like because he comes back, he kind of we get the reveal later on. He initially says that he was an informant for Fedra, and Joel kind of immediately gets that distrust for him, but then softens a bit later when he realizes what he's done, and basically he's given up someone that he held in quite high regard because it was the only way to get this medicine for Sam, who had leukemia. And then like that all of a sudden makes it a lot more understandable. But I think this is the thing as well, is like kind of we always assume that the zombie apocalypse or a infected, Last of Us type thing, people in this sort of savage dog eat dog world, but actually until very recently they were all kind of caged in by the quarantine zone, and the main threat was not complying with Fedra, who acted like possibly the most extreme version of that sort of Fedra, who's not a very nice organization to begin with, but sort of everything that's been said hints to them being kind of the worst. Yeah, well, I mean, out of the fascists, they're the most fascists of all of them. But yeah, so that kind of creates this whole sort of network of suspicion and distrust, which is where the informant stuff comes from, and like people kind of feel like that's the only way that they can survive isn't by banding together with each other, which and making things better. It's by turning against each other, because that's the way to appease this big threat, which again comes back. It's not the infected, it's not the clickers and bloaters, it's the humans, it's the the remnants of the old social order and the military.
Yeah. The government are Nazis. Well, they are now. Right?
No, true.
Right, they are now. It's like that's the way that Frank delivered that line, like, obviously. It's just, spoke a lot to how people see their government in that world.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea I thought that made Joel trust Henry more was the whole leukemia story.
Mm.
And I think, like, doing it for Sam, he can see, because he would do anything for Sarah. And now he's getting to the point where he will push himself and deal with the loss of Tess, even for Ellie.
I think there's a lot of foreshadowing there to obviously the big decision Joel makes later on in the game. And I think Joel's he's made that decision now that, because he's getting a lot closer now to Ellie, I think he will make that decision, obviously, he does, to make the tough decision later on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And can't wait to see everybody who hasn't.
Yeah.
seen
Well,
it.
we'll come on to that. Yeah, we'll come on to when we talk about future episodes and what we're hoping to see. I will put a spoiler warning at that point for future things, so we can talk a bit more freely about everything that's coming there.
Yeah.
But I mean, so like I'm just in terms of Henry specifically. I mean, as you say, there's a lot of foreshadowing, and I think this is kind of building on this theme. It's about what they've said before. It's about basically the whole thing is a love story and everything that comes from love, which is not always good. But we're also seeing in terms of what Henry versus Bill versus Joel, in terms of not just they're all showing that person who's willing to do the things to protect for the one they need to protect and look out for and love, but also that manifests in different ways. Like in terms of Bill was obviously extremely competent. That was the one thing he was good at before he met Frank, and that whole survivalist mentality, and that was why he had everything prepped out. And then obviously once Frank came into his life, that became even more intense. Whereas Henry has got that same kind of instinct. He needs to protect his brother, but he's a lot less experienced. That experience isn't there. He's kind of feeling his way along, and we see a lot of those kind of fumbles and mistakes in terms of, as you said before, is how positive he is and kind of gets overconfident about things, like sort of declaring, like shouting in the tunnels, or when he tries to run away from the sniper and then towards the end and nearly gets shot. And that's obviously like kind of speaks, I think, to that thing of like that instinct is always there, but it's not always as well honed as it could be, and things can go wrong, which obviously we see they do in the most kind of horribly tragic way later on. But I want to hold off talking about that at the end just for now, because I think kind of talking about what Henry did and kind of why he did it brings us on to Kathleen and Kathleen's kind of story in this. Like, and I think we had a little bit of it in the last episode. Obviously, we added this sort of, she was always this, and I said this before, where you've got characters in these sorts of things like Negan in The Walking Dead, who's very brash, over the top, like in that sort of way. Whereas I find these sort of quiet, softly spoken characters with that dark end to them a lot scarier. Like sort of, that sort of essentially, what's the American term, soccer mom, and then she's got, but at the same time, it's also like, no, we're not going to put them on trial, kill them and burn the bodies, that sort of stuff. Or, well, kids kids die all the time. He should have died.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Kathleen, let's talk about Kathleen.
The moment that in the previous episode where she said about Brian, would a doctor be able to save him? No. Okay, I can kill the doctor then, yeah? That's what you're saying. That gave us like, okay, this is Kathleen. I love her as a character. I mean, I'm glad that I hadn't forgotten about her. Me going, what? I don't remember this bit. I remember Harry and stuff. I don't remember Kathleen. No, there's a reason for that, it turns out. Hurrah. I love her. I think she's a great character. I think she's got some depth. She knows she's over the top, but she thinks she can't help it now. She thinks she's locked into this path. There's no other way it's going to end.
Yeah.
And this is not what your brother would have wanted. I know, but I'm still going to kill him. Was like, okay, it's just hurtling towards the inevitable now. And that whole resignation. She's got everybody out of under the boot of Fedra. But I'm not even going to say at what cost, because she knows the costs. She knows. But she also, I don't think, thinks she's going to be around forever to run everything afterwards. She's just doing bits what she can do now, tidying up after the event, like a good soccer mum does. And then going, right, well, I'm not going to be your leader forever because I'm hurtling towards this ultimate confrontation between me and Henry. And yes, she thinks she's going to kill Henry. But I also think she doesn't quite take the clickers and the what I asked you this yesterday, didn't I? Exactly what they're called, not the bloaters, not I keep want to call them stragglers, shamblers. That's it. She doesn't take them seriously because that big hole starts to appear, and she's like, "Oh, we'll deal with that later." Bitch, what do you mean you deal with that later?
Yeah.
It's like, what? This? You know what I mean? Like, no.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
totally. She's just been overshadowed by her brother, hasn't she, constantly throughout whatever she's done. And she's just seen that if she tries to do what her brother's done, it'll just be a case of, oh, you're just carrying on what your brother wanted to do. And
Yeah.
she's making her own path. And even though the own path is completely the opposite direction, what she should be doing to make these survive the longest, she's just like, no, it's my point of view. It's my vision. I'm going this way. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
No.
I'm not copying anyone else.
Yeah, it's almost deliberately self-destructive at that point as well, isn't it? Because it's like, as long as I get back at, I mean, this kind of again feeds in everything. Feeds into that main theme of like love and the protector, and she's lost the person who was her protector. I think I get the impression until that point it was the other way around. She was the one being looked after. He was the resistance leader and this charismatic leader that everyone looked up to, and then that's kind of broken her in a way that like she's making decisions that are not sensible decisions for the longevity of a community. They're decisions based purely in wrath.
We know full well that he was her protector because we have that gorgeous scene where she's in her childhood bedroom with the bunk beds, and she's talking about when there was a storm, and he would tell her that they were in a box and nothing could get in and make her feel safe. Right, so we know that he was her protector and that she then had to go on, but she's not a protector, she's a tyrant.
No, exactly.
She's as bad as Fedra.
Yeah, because she's just all based on vengeance, isn't she, against Henry? But there's a little bit inside of me that would think that if she did actually get a vengeance on Henry, how would she deal with the group and how would she manage it then? Now that she's reached her vision of, right, Henry's gone, that traitor I need to get rid of, I would have kind of seen a tiny little bit to see what she would have done, if she would have been better, or would she just carry down that path of, right, let's just destroy everything?
Honestly, it's like for her to have killed him and then go, oh, now what?
Yeah.
It would have been really quite interesting. But
yeah, I think that's where everything starts to fall apart. Because like people are, it certainly appears to me like the loyalty to the brother, but also kind of the fact that she led them through the actual revolution, got them free. That's kind of keeping her keeping her going. She's riding that wave of loyalty, and then obviously there's all that sort of stuff that comes with the bloodlust and everything else. But then once that drops off, there's not really much left. And if what happened hadn't happened in the way it did, it would have happened somewhere else down the line, because she's been ignoring that particular problem the whole time. So we'll tell people when the time is right. We'll tell people later, after Henry, and then that's when it's. But then it becomes a problem that doesn't necessarily have a solution.
No.
So yeah, I mean, I a lot of that stuff. Like I say, I liked her character in terms of like the like sort of menace exuded, and the fact that someone, because I think this is one of the things that this series and like the writing in the games and that does it really well, is like, even when people are very clearly bad guys, like, there's not sort of a redeeming feature. No one's sitting there thinking, well, maybe Kathleen is actually in the right. Maybe she should shoot Henry and then shoot his 8-year-old deaf brother. Because maybe she's justified in doing, like, there's not an answer to that really. There's no. Like, she's a bad guy, but she's a real person as well, because like everyone who's a bad guy is still a real person who kind of has their own rationalizations, and they're not just sort of sitting there twirling the mustache and flinging the cape about it. There's actual sorts of depth to it, and I think I mean, that often gets confused for justifying or excusing their actions, but I think that just, in reality, it just adds a lot more depth, and it just makes you realize that that's scary, because that could be a real person. You could kind of see real world people in that sort of thing.
Yeah. What an episode. It's just every time I think about it, I'm like, and then this and this and also can't stop thinking about
They
it.
definitely packed a lot in, didn't they?
Yeah,
They did. Now the guy who when they are trying to escape, and it's like, just through here and we're done, and that last outpost where the final battle takes place, can we talk about that yet?
Yeah, well, I was going to talk about something else, but we can come back to that. So so you're talking about the sniper section?
Yes, the sniper section. It was gorgeous. Again, it felt like, I don't know whether it's the game that feels like real life, or the telly that feels like the game, but obviously they've got it right twice. Because when I'm watching you play it, it feels like, I've said to you before, it feels like I'm watching a film sometimes. Because the game is that intelligent, and I'm a writer, so and my thing is moving story through dialogue and showing emotion through dialogue, and they get this right over and over again, which is why every single time when it comes up with Craig Mazin at the front, I go, Craig amazing. Am I right? and I'm never going to stop doing it, because like, they are obviously such a great team between them.
Yeah.
I'm just in awe of the way they've written things. Like for the previous episode, again, with Ellie's eyes lighting up at the wall of guns, and Joel just going, no, because he knows. And didn't have to be that. And that little piece spoke of, I know who you are because I'm getting to know you better. I am protecting you, and I know I'm not your dad, but I'm still going to act like that some ways, and I'm going to allow you to have these things and develop as I think. And that was just through one word, and they've done this all the way through.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
On that point with the guns as well. Once they're going through the tunnel, and like you see that section where Joel says, "Get your gun out." I don't know if you noticed the little look that like Bella Ramsey gives her, sort of as she gets her gun out, and she's kind of like, "Yeah, I've got a gun."
Yeah.
I mean, can we just say Bella Ramsey deserves all the flowers for everything? Her portrayal. I was really worried, because I love video gamer. Ashley, I love video game Ellie so much, and Bella Ramsey's just amazing. how she's managed to get me from not see her as Leanna Mormont, who is like my heroine in the world, but she's playing it with just this softness and the range of emotion.
Mm.
The range on her. They're
Yeah.
all just doing brilliantly.
Yeah, they've really kept the essence of the characters themselves, but also making it new for them.
Yeah.
And that's what's the real big hitter with it. It's not just a carbon copy. Look, here we go. They've said
Yeah.
the lines. They've got the same clothes on. It's
Yeah.
new characters essentially.
Can I
with-
tell you what my face
yeah.
was like when Perry came on screen? I was like, he sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, no, that's Game Tommy.
Yeah.
Who is another one who like very understated, because obviously his main thing was to be a foil to Kathleen Perry, but still a really good, solid performance. And kind of, I think the main thing was just portraying his kind of like resignation at like, well, I guess we're going on this path.
Yeah.
Come on, mate. Until that point where obviously it's like that abject terror when he faces his final moments.
Yeah, his face. Oh my god, that was really summed it up, didn't it? At that point,
Yeah.
when he's making that face and he's got them guns, it's like, okay, yeah, something's happening now.
Yeah. But that
We're screwed.
cinematography. That cinematography when all hell literally broke loose because they came up from a pit. And the
blaze of
looks.
glory.
Yeah. Just not an awful lot to say to that. I was just like, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was intense. But I mean, when did you want to? I think I derailed you from wanting to talk about the sniper.
Oh
part.
yeah.
You had, or have you covered what you wanted to say?
I think I've covered what I wanted to say on that. It was just like the game and the film and the game and the film, and I don't know which is the one that is more like the other. At this point, it feels like they're just one thing, and it's just The Last of Us lore now. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do have a couple of things there, and again, slightly different in delivery from how it's played in the game, which is obviously a constant recurring theme. And I realize at this point, like, there's like people on TikTok making these things where, like, about anyone who's watched the show, who's played the game, like even the slightest thing comes from doing the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen thing. But yeah, I mean, in terms of that specific scene, in terms of the sniper, one of them is kind of, there's more dialogue in terms of when Joel's telling Ellie to stay put, and kind of like he explicitly says, do you trust me? This is what's going to happen. You're going to be okay. As opposed to the kind of the other dialogue, which is just, before you start, I need you to keep him busy. I'm going to go around the outside. It's different kind of approach to it, which I think feeds into what you were saying about the trust that we see with the sniper situation later. But then we also get the person who is the sniper is not just like a random NPC that you have to press a button prompt to like stab him in the throat. He's this old man. He's standing there, and Joel just kind of this tired look on his face, like, please don't. Before, and I don't want to have to kill you. I will, but I don't want to have to do this.
Which I think is also a testament to his change in his behaviour now, because I think like before he met Ellie, I don't think Joel would have taken any second. He would have just gone, right, boom, dead. Where he's actually given him a chance to survive and gone, look, I don't want to do this, but it's up to you what you want to do.
Yeah. Either way. Just walk away, mate.
Just walk away, mate. Get eaten by the bloater instead. Don't worry.
Is that why he's a bloater? Because he's been eating everyone. No, I'm not fat shaming the infected.
We all know it. That's it. You've cancelled.
That's it. That's it. And cancelled now. I'm going to have to make a big apology on Twitter. Sorry.
But yeah, so I mean, that obviously brings us like into the infected themselves and everything that happens there. there's so much going on in that. Like that scene is like 5 minutes, I think, tops. When they're all pulling out, and there's obviously enough, but there's that sort of initial chaos, but then there's so many more things packed on. So first question, I think, is like, obviously we see the bloater, we also see that clicker child that gets in the car with Ellie. Now I put a poll on my YouTube channel, and the results were kind of 80 to 20% wise, like in favor of the bloater, but I think there are reasons for both. So I'm going to ask, which is scarier for you? Which one would you least like to face?
It would all depend on the scenario, I think. Obviously, if you're trapped in the locked car, well, to be honest with both of them, if you're trapped in a locked car with a bloater, I think you're screwed anyway. But I think it would have to be the bloater for me, to be honest. Just the sheer size, just how gargantuan it was and how fast it moved. And literally grab someone, twist, head's gone flying. You're just like, okay.
I mean, he was a big boy, and for a big boy, he did move quite quickly. He was a swifty boy as well as a big boy.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's got to be the contortionist clicker child, because there was part of me that was thinking, if I was in a locked car with her, my first word would be seatbelt. Because it's so ingrained in me to tell a child to buckle up. But she was just, I think, because she was so, what's the word I'm looking for? Single-minded. She had a purpose. She was so purposefully coming and flipping and moving. And I think it was the way the neck and stuff was moving. It was very much like like The Ring. That whole moving jerkily thing, which has always been which is already implanted into the collective consciousness as creepy.
Yeah, there's something demonic there.
Yeah. Stick a bit of that in and you're automatically thinking really scary. If somebody's moving like that, that's now creepy. I think the bloater, I would know I was done for. I'd be like, fair enough.
Yeah, you know how you're going with a bloater, but with a contortionist child clicker, you're like, how am I going to go? What's it going to do?
What's it going to do? Is it going to eat me? Is it going to bite me? Am I going to end up like that? Will it mean I can do gymnastics? I don't know. Is there a circus I can join?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I think for me. What about for you?
Well, I mean, obviously the thing with the bloater is, and what Perry should have done, as soon as his ammo ran out, he just needed to move out the path of the bloater. You know, maybe melee kill an infected to get the ammo drop, reload, then just keep moving around, get a few Molotov cocktails over there. It's all very simple once you know what you're doing.
I mean, maybe he didn't have it in his inventory.
No.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think in both situations, realistically, unless you've got the space to just run, then that's going to be a situation. I mean, well, I say that. I think, if you're not in an enclosed space, I'm thinking about it a little bit more. If you're not in an enclosed space, like the child clicker is still a child, so just still a degree to which you could just kind of obviously keep away from the mouth, but put your hand on the head and just sort of hold them back as they flail at you. And,
and then turn them upside down and shake them or listen to them laugh.
No, but I work with small kids and they are very quick. And literally, I tie a shoelace and they're all climbing all over me. So I do understand how, they are very quick.
It's like with the bloater, though, because I was thinking, well, if the bloater's running towards you, he's got some momentum going. That was the word I was looking for earlier, momentum. He's got this momentum going. Surely you just dive out the way at the last minute so he goes past you and then you can come behind him and do stuff. And then I was thinking, if this thing's coming towards me, I'm just basically going to shit my pants then die. I mean, I'd be like, now dive and do that. But I wouldn't. I'd shit my pants and die.
Yeah. I'd be there with you, I think. The only chance you've got is ring around roses around the car until he flips it over.
Right.
That's all you've got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
and
just
point, I'm like,
leg it down the street and just hope for the best.
Yeah, I don't do legging it.
Or maybe Henry's idea at the end of the episode. That's probably your best way.
Yeah. Oh, it, Henry and Sam. I mean, we have missed. No, we haven't missed out because there is that end bit with Sam and Ellie. But yeah, it is the small child that would freak me out more.
Yeah.
But I would shit my pants then die with the bloater.
Well, there we go. I
order.
had to know that for science, you understand, but it's good to know where we all stand with this. But I mean, before we move on from this scene, I think it is probably worth saying, aside from jokes around the bloater and stuff, and obviously we know already that the makeup and effects are really well done. To the point, like that bloater, like the clickers before, was majority practical. Like there was an actual guy in a bloater suit, which
that was insane.
Apparently weighed like 40 kilos or something like that, or like on top of this guy who's already like quite built. But everything
it was like $500,000, wasn't it, to make the actual costume as well?
Blimey.
I can imagine
insane.
that being quite the undertaking.
Yeah.
But everything about that in terms of like the way it looked and the way it was shot and like the angles they used to sort of that close up of them spewing out to kind of like show just how many there are and make that sort of frantic shock moments, and then that wide angle shot as you see like the machine guns and everything are not really slowing them down and they keep coming, and then we get close up. And that shift in perspective once like it's between Ellie moving through the car and trying to get away, and then the constant look back and forth between everything about that like was just brilliantly shot, and it just so much done, like so much told and said in the story without a single word of dialogue other than the occasional scream or bellow of pain as heads were ripped off.
Yeah, for how ordered it was so chaotic to watch because it was just bam, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and you're like trying to take it all in. It was sort of like a full episode in 5 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so much, but I did like the touch that Kathleen was killed by a kid.
Mm.
They do all die, but some of them kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a nice touch. But it was chaotic, but it felt like forever, even though it was really quite short.
Yeah.
It just, Can you imagine being in the middle of all that? You wouldn't know where to look first.
No. And the 1 ounce of keeping control was Joel with his sniper rifle.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. He made every single shot.
Yeah.
Whereas, as we've seen throughout the rest of the episodes, he seems like he's not very proficient in what he's doing. But because obviously he knew what was on the line. If I don't make that shot, she's dead.
Yeah.
And you could tell the intent and how much he was taking control of that situation.
Yeah. And having failed permadeath in that part because I've missed a shot
I can imagine.
Someone's got too close, I know just how high the stakes are.
But yeah, I mean, Ellie is on the line, which again speaks volumes without a word of dialogue.
Yeah.
And that she knows, he knows she's on the line. And that trust there.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah.
I got really emotional watching it.
Mm.
And I've got like goosebumps talking about it now.
Yeah. You could see that Ellie was just making that run, like even though that clicker is in front of me or whatever was in front of her, Joel's going to clear it for me and I'm going to get there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Blimey.
Yeah, which, I mean, there's potentially other bits and bobs we can go back to, but I think in terms of the broad thrust of the story, this brings us on, obviously, to the next scene once they escape. And we have Ellie and Sam conversation about what scares them and talking about 2 things there. One, which is, like, I think heavily playing into Ellie's character about where she's talking about, like, her main fear is ending up alone.
Yeah.
Which I think we will see a lot more of once we learn more about her backstory in future episodes and other things. But we also, obviously, Sam asks that question of whether the person is still conscious inside of the infected, and that's kind of his big fear. We know why in a moment, but just to kind of put that one out there, like that's, I think, probably one of the best bits of like horror, and particularly body horror, that The Last of Us does, is that is the case. Like that the infected are still conscious inside that, because Cordyceps takes over your motor functions, it takes over your body and your movements. But it doesn't actually take over the brain. It doesn't go into the brain itself, even though it grows around it. So you're still, and you have to be alive, because if once you're dead, it's got no further use for you. So like in the game, you'll drop dead and you'll release cloud of spores. In the show, you'll kind of, the tendrils will absorb you like that guy in the wall if you've died there. But you only turn into a clicker or a bloater or anything else if you're alive that long. So there's still something inside. Which is why, incidentally, in the games, when the runners are kind of inert, like in an area, and just sort of stand there, you can hear them crying.
Yeah.
So that's big.
That's the most terrifying part of that. Not that they're still and could explode into motion at any second, but the fact that they're still inside there. But when talking about Sam and Ellie and the conversation they had, you know the thing he uses to write on, the thing?
The magnetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't last forever, right? My kids all had them, and they're great. You can draw on them, but it doesn't take much for them not to be of any use. They're quite fragile, and the more you use them, the closer you are. If you went that one day, you just won't hear that. It just goes, and that's the day you can no longer do it. And I thought using that, rather than having Henry have found him a load of paper and made him something where he could write on paper and have cards or something, using that showed the fact that he wasn't looking forward to longevity, because that would only last as long as he lasted. And once that went, how would he communicate then? I thought it was a really nice touch to use that as a device rather than have Henry find him some paper. I know, I'm a literature buff. I like writing. I look very deep into things, but it was like, oh, my kids had them. They don't last 2 minutes, was my first thought, and neither did Sam.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that, before the actual end, we see this thing where he kind of reveals to Ellie that he's been bitten. He shows the bite off, and then Ellie, which again is another departure from the game, because Sam hides his infection, and then it just the morning after scene happens. But we have this moment where Ellie kind of thinks she can cure him by putting her hand and using her blood against his blood, and like obviously that's wrong, but that's also very much kind of a child's understanding of this.
That's what she's doing. I didn't think that at all.
Yeah.
I thought she knew full well that she couldn't cure him, but she was doing it to make him feel good. She was comforting him.
I'm wondering if there's a little tiny bit of essence in showing that her blood actually is capable of healing, because surely he would have turned quicker.
I don't know, overnight
In the
sounds
evening.
about right. Yeah, I don't know. But for me, it was like, I know this isn't going to work, but it's, if you think it's going to work, you're going to spend your last hours feeling not so scared. I felt it was very much her being a mother to him at that point.
Oh, interesting. Because, like I say, I took it like from the fact that she finally fell asleep in the room, and then kind of went to him to check on him, and was like almost taken by surprise, and the message of "I'm sorry" at the end. That was why I was taking it the other way. I mean, I can see it. I can see it that way now that you've said it, but I didn't take it that way at all.
The falling asleep in the chair. I mean, well, if you work with kids, you know full well they can sleep standing up, and kids will say, "I'm going to stay awake all night," and then 2 hours later they're zonked and they're gone, and they don't. So that's what that bit looked like to me.
Yeah.
Like, though she hadn't gone to sleep in the chair, she'd accidentally fallen asleep in the chair, because her saying that she would stay awake with him all night served two things. One, it meant he wasn't alone, and two, if he did turn an attacker, she was at least awake to face it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because again, I was just like, oh well, if she's not afraid enough to, and she'll still fall asleep, then maybe she thinks this will work. And
It's a different way of looking at it, but that's how I read it.
Yeah.
Very
No,
interesting.
I don't know whether I'm reading it a different way because with a different perspective, because I've had enough children around me going, I'm staying awake all night, and remember being a child going, even an adult, I'm staying awake all night.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
dear.
never make that promise because I know it won't pan out.
Yes, dear, I'll watch this direct with you that's coming out at 3 a.m. I'll just lie down to watch it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Will. Were you going to say something else in there
No,
as well?
I think that's what's been a real good testament as well to the show is that quite a few of the scenarios that we've had, there's a lot that you can take. There's loads of different takes from it, and no one is. I don't think is right. I think it's just all subjective to your point of view. I think.
Yeah.
And that's what's really good, and I think that's what gets the real good discussion about the show. And I think that's where the word of mouth is coming from, is that people are having these chats and saying, "Look, what do you think of this situation? What's happened here?"
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's what gets people hooked into the show.
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter why Ellie did it,
No.
as long as you've got your perspective, because my perspective makes sense in the show, but then your perspective makes sense in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see what I mean? And the
Yeah,
I'm sorry that you had to die thing was
Mm.
like that you had to die, and I'm sorry when she put the thing down. Just,
Yeah. Well,
and
yeah.
then all we heard was the sound of my heart going.
Well, obviously, yeah. What happened next was in that moment of like when Sam turns and then like they come through the door and Henry tries to stop Joel and then obviously has to kill Sam himself. And there's that moment of like disbelief at what he's done. He's sort of before it all washes over him and hits. And
Yeah.
yeah, as you say, that there's not much else to happen other than just like being punched in the gut. And
I mean, that was a moment in itself, because why did he stop
Yeah.
Joel? Did he stop Joel for a second thinking, no, he'll be we can make it all right for him? Just in a split second, stop Joel, no, you can't kill him because maybe there's some sort of optimistic miracle. And we've already seen he's like overly optimistic and a bit foolish with his optimism. Is he thinking in that split second, no, Joel, we can make him better? Or is he thinking, you will not kill my brother. If anybody has to do this, I will do this, because I'm now seeing it through to the end.
yeah. And then
Sam Henry goes, oh shit, well, there's the end. I've got no more reason to live. So essentially he's done a Bill.
Yeah.
And essentially he's done a Tess.
Yeah. And this is where what we were talking about before about the different, all with the same motive, all the protectors, but it plays out in different ways. Bill was ultimately successful in what he did and he died happy at the end of his life. Tess died sort of to allow them to push on and continue the journey.
Yeah.
Henry died having failed to do what he was supposed to do, his one sort of purpose, and it was like that was the one that was tragic. That was the one that was the kind of the underside of, you know, everything's gone completely wrong in this world. And I think just kind of coming back to the Bill and Frank in particular, I think that's probably another reason why the change in terms of Bill and Frank's story here was so good, because it meant that we didn't have two failures and two tragedies. It meant we had one that showed how things can be good and how things can work out, and then the other one that showed the bad side. So rather than it being the same thing again,
Yeah.
Which works fine for the games because it's told in different ways, and there's a more direct impact with the Henry and Sam than there is with Bill and Frank because you never meet Frank. But yeah, this like now is like kind of someone who's not got the right experience, who can't do the violence as well. He doesn't know what he's doing with it, and he has to kind of bluff it, and it goes wrong because he's not as good at the violence as the other people who are out in the world, which obviously leads them to the situation with Kathleen and then with the infected.
It gets me. Tess, she said in that whole run up to being snogged by a fungus, which was just like turn my stomach. Like she should have borrowed a lighter off like Dean Winchester because his always goes first time and he could chuck it in a salted grave. But Tess says, "I never asked you for anything, not for your love," and it's obvious she loves him. So she says, "I never asked you for anything. Let me do this," because what she's essentially saying at that point is, "You were my purpose." And
Yeah.
then Bill uses the words, "I'm old, I'm satisfied, and you were my purpose." Sam says it all with the look on his face. "You were my purpose." So what else does he have now? So there's again the "you were my purpose" thing that's said in different ways, but it's the same message all the way through. And this is how the writing is just so effing clever.
Mm.
I know you said I could swear, but I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be good today. It's so clever because there's 3 different characters in 3 different scenarios who are all saying the same thing. And even with Kathleen, killing Henry was her purpose. And she lost her purpose because he got away. So what was left for her?
Yeah.
What's
And
left when you lose your purpose?
Yeah. I think that's a good thing. Obviously, towards the end of the game, I won't spoil everything with the Joel situation. His choice, I think he makes, is making him lead away with. Obviously, he wants to keep having that purpose, and I wonder what Joel would do if he did no longer have a purpose. Obviously, with Tommy and now Ellie, I wonder what he would do.
I mean, I'm saying this in full knowledge that Phil can cut it out. He would go to Jackson and give blowjobs for coffee. You don't have to keep that
It
in.
does sound like that's going to be a short.
Right. Like, seriously, I have this thing. Every time Neil Druckmann's on Twitter, I email him and ask him what Joel did, or I tweet him and ask him what Joel did for the coffee. Yeah, I think without the purpose, what would he do? I think he'd go back and he'd be a mercenary or something. He'd be awful. He'd be absolutely awful.
But yeah, because also from all these different relationships that he's seen end and the way they've ended,
Yeah.
Is he now starting to lean into that way? If he lost his brother Tommy and he lost Ellie, would he then take his own life, or would he?
I don't think he would. I don't think Joel could do it.
No.
No. I don't know. I just don't think. What do you think, babe?
Well, I don't know whether they'll kind of lean into this in the show or whether they'll kind of skim past it. But there is a section when you're in Pittsburgh and you're kind of like going through before you get to the hotel basements section where you've got like a bunch of stalkers and stuff. There's hunters in a hotel, and if you clear them all out and kill them, you can find a room where there's 2 skeletons in a bathtub who very clearly committed suicide and things like that. And Ellie makes a comment and says they took the easy way out, to which Joel simply responds, "Trust me, it ain't that easy." And that's kind of that's all we get with it. But that moment is kind of the hint of that at some point somewhere along the line he's tried to do that and he couldn't bring himself to do it for whatever reason.
No.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that. You're quite right. But yeah, maybe that was why subconsciously I didn't think he would. I don't know. He just doesn't seem. And I know like depression and suicidal ideation and stuff can hit anybody at any time, but Joel? Nah.
No. He's probably somewhat too proud, I think.
Yeah, it would probably be a case of, well, I've got this far.
Well, yeah, you're 56.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's lucky I don't like older men. It's all like, mind you, Pedro. I mean,
oh no,
it's all right. I'll just pretend I'm not. Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, I said to Phil, it is understood that I've got a free pass for Pedro Pascal, right? And he just looked at me and got up and made a coffee. And I'm like, I'm not hearing yes. So no, apparently not.
Anyway,
Anyway,
shall we swiftly move on from
glimpse into our marriage
that? So, I mean, I think obviously we've covered all the major points of the episode and everything that happened in there and like that. So, I mean, before we move on, is there anything else in the episode that you can think of that you want to kind of call back to or talk about, or like whether it's a big detail or a little detail? Anything else?
I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was the conversation the night before with Joel and Henry, where Joel invites Henry along on the journey. I think that was like a really big change in Joel, because obviously I don't think he would have ever taken anyone on. He would never. He's just met this random guy the night before. He's had a gun pointing to his head from him, and now he's invited him onto the journey. I think it's sort of the realization, the humanity side of Joel is coming out, and it was probably one of the biggest moments for me, for Joel, to show that he's now starting to change and really taking stride in the show.
Yeah, I agree. I think that moment for Joel is where possibly he's starting to digest what Bill's letter said. Where he's like, we are these kind of people, look out for these kind of people. And I think because he knows Henry, because the tutting is what did it for me. Every time Henry said something ridiculous or shouted or anything, and he'd be like, quiet. And it's like the tutting. So maybe he's seeing himself as a protector of more than Ellie. If he can help, he will help, because he wants so badly to be a better person and to be this person that Bill saw in him.
Yeah,
definitely. Maybe he could take Henry on, because I think he was at that point, as you said, like probably wanting to protect them both, not just Sam.
Yeah,
he could see obviously the softness in Henry, and in somewhat trying to envelop him, trying to help him through and build him up to become a person that he can protect Sam properly.
And he also knows what it's like to be deaf in one ear. This is how they got the jump on him.
Yeah.
He was sleeping on his good ear, which is how they got the jump on him. So, yeah, that broken glass, so I won't get snuck up on, really. Sleep the other side.
Very Home Alone.
Yeah.
So the only other thing from the episode that I'll just quickly mention, just for anyone who was watching it and maybe wondering about it, when they go through the underground tunnel passage and they obviously see this area that's been painted up to look like a castle, and there's like that whole sort of play area, and there's the little sign on the notice board, the drawing, they're like, our protectors, Danny and Ish, like a child's drawing. This is obviously a reference to something that's told through notes that you find in the game when you're in the sewer section in Pittsburgh. So if anyone is interested in more of the lore of that, since you're already on my channel anyway, check out, I made a video specifically on this subject, which goes into a lot more detail, so you should check that out. But I think as well, I just like the fact that we're getting these little details. Like we're not going to get obviously the full story of it here, because that would be too big a diversion from this kind of driving forward plot. But I think it's good that we're getting these little nods and like touches to sort of these side stories that we find as we travel through the story. But I think this also fits into something that I've said a few times elsewhere, and I said it'd be good to see whether we get it in like more comic book, like the American Dreams comic books that we had, with they told like Ellie's very earliest stories, or whether we get it into sort of like some sort of TV episode, but like sort of a one shot, I suppose. They should tell more of these stories, I think, because there's so many side stories in the world of The Last of Us that are so kind of rich with possibility that we see through notes and found, I think, in environmental storytelling, that it'd be so good to see somewhere something that bring them to life more.
Yeah, I think that's when they talked about the potential for 4 seasons. I think obviously we know there's not 4 games, so obviously we can't do that. But it'd be good to see us like with The Walking Dead, where they have the side projects.
Yeah,
it'd be good to have maybe a potential side project where they follow and look at these sort of side stories and try and maybe a one-shot episode of these of the smaller stories within the game.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
not necessarily linked, but it does explore those stories, and we can see the start and where they came from and where they've ended. That'd be a really good thing, I think.
There was a program years ago, about 9, 10 years ago, called Cucumber, and it had tofu, cucumber, and banana. Now, cucumber was the main story. Banana was about the people in the background of those stories. So we got the story of the waitress who served them in the restaurant. So that was a really good way of doing it, and they did it like straight
Yeah.
after they had their little hour episodes. Then tofu was a discussion thing about the whole thing, and then they did another one which went into the families of the people who were essentially the NPCs, and
Yeah.
that was a really creative way of doing it. So I don't know if Neil Druckmann and Craig Amazing have thought about doing it. Oh, they probably have. But if they want any help, if you're listening, because obviously they listen, like, happy to help you out with that, lads.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are ways they could do it. I loved it. Like, I still miss the governor in Walking Dead.
Hmm.
Like, you gotta have a villain with an eye patch sometimes. It's
Oh,
just,
God, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there are ways they could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, that's there's not really much more to that. That's just kind of a general wish, I think, because I end up having quite a lot of conversations with people, whether chatting on Twitter or people have commented on my streams and stuff, talking about, I wonder what happened to such and such, or whether this and this, and it's like, these could definitely be a kind of expanded universe, or whatever phrase you'd use, I suppose, because it's not a universe in the sense of Star Wars, but yeah, they could definitely do more of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think the Bill and Frank episode did show that we can have episodes where we can really not even see Joel or Ellie and still have these amazing stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's a really good testament to the writing of this, well, the game and the show, is just that you could literally take any snippet of the game and pull it out into a TV show, and it would be amazing.
Well, yeah. So they've done that with Bill and Frank. Now they can do it with the others. Thank you.
Yes.
Please and thank you. Bit of Beaujolais with rabbit, and then away we go.
Yeah.
Aye. Okay. So, I mean, to round things up, let's talk about what we're looking forward to in the remainder of the season, because we have got 4 episodes left. We're now past the halfway point. This section will contain spoilers for the game and potential spoilers for future episodes of the show, so check the timestamps in the description if you want to steer clear of those. With all that said, you've been warned. So we've got 4 episodes left in the season now, and we know that the majority of episode 6 is going to focus on Joel and Tommy reuniting in Jackson, as well as the university chapter of the game, which seems to suggest that it'll end with Joel being seriously injured, where Ellie has to take care of him, especially because we know episode 7 is going to be Left Behind, which is essentially going to tell the story of that DLC, which is half flashback to Ellie's time with Riley, part the intervening time between what happened to Joel and the winter chapter where she meets David, which is going to be what happens in episode 9. Obviously, the cat is very interested in what's going to come in the future of The Last of Us.
That was Frida.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, episode 8, not episode 9, is when we meet David and that sort of chapter, and then episode 9 is the finale, which is also going to be the shortest episode of the season, which is when we have the Firefly Hospital called Look for the Light and everything that happens there. So, I mean, firstly, with episode 6 specifically, what are you hoping to see from it in terms of your expectations for it and what you're looking forward to and all that sort of stuff?
I hope it'd be nice and jolly and doesn't make me cry. I mean, I've got some hope and no hope, but
Yeah. No, I think it'll be all about. It's going to be all about Joel and Tommy, isn't it? In their relationship and seeing where now Joel's had these experiences and Tommy's had his experiences. Now they've come together, where their point of view is going to be. Because obviously we know that Tommy's very much a follower and a hero and wanting to do, has his experiences now changed what he wants to do. and now Joel's seeing the more human side and not wanting to be a hero, but essentially being a hero and a protector. Just seeing how that relationship plays out in that episode and how they write that. That's going to be my biggest point for the next episode.
I agree with you again, Will. It's like Dee agrees with Will, the podcast. But it's I am hoping, and I'm sure, because again, I have hope, which is stupid. We've decided that they do a little bit of Abby and Jerry, because that whole bit in the game where Abby and Jerry rescue the zebra, and you can see how close they are with the, I found a coin to add to your collection. All of that father-daughter stuff, which essentially is put up as a direct comparison with Joel and Ellie, because we know that Jerry's a good dad. We don't know what happened to her mum, to Abby's mum. And again, it would foreshadow what's maybe coming in season 2. But it would also, I think, I would have liked to have seen a whole Jerry and Abby episode in the same sort of way as a Bill and Frank, because I like Jerry and Abby, their relationship. It's love the way he teases her about all she fancies Owen, and it's just really wholesome. I think we could do with a bit of wholesome.
Yeah,
Before
definitely.
it breaks my heart again.
Well, I mean,
How deep can we go?
Yeah, you were talking about like wanting it to be cheery with no sadness, and obviously then you're talking about having basically a prelude to a woman having her father killed by the main character of the show.
No, we've met, right?
So I
That's
think
the happy
that would
part.
undermine your happy and
No,
jolly
because
moments.
then what happens?
Well, if you put it in
later
context
on-
of the season,
Exactly. A protector, and she can't protect him. She's a kid. What's she gonna do?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I strongly suspect that we'll see not anything kind of deep or not anything, but enough to sort of like see maybe a moment or some sort of glimmer of a hint of who she is. Obviously,
Unless we get that as a flashback in
Yeah.
season 2.
obviously, yeah, we when they were filming this, they didn't know they were greenlit for season 2, so they may not have
Yeah.
cast anyone at that point, or if
Yeah.
they did, they might not necessarily cast anyone for long term. So, but at the same time, we know like someone has been cast in the Jackson episode when Joel and Ellie go to Jackson, which again is different from the games because they don't go to the dam; they go outside of Jackson, they go into Jackson itself, and someone has been cast in a role of staring girl who looks very much like Dina. And we know that when Ellie first goes to Jackson, Dina mentions in Last of Us Part 2 that one of the first things she noticed like this skinny girl who was stealing all the jerky like in the canteen. So that suggests that they'll start laying some seeds of some of this. So like in terms of like Ellie's future girlfriend and stuff. I mean, I don't think they'll go too heavy because I think doing that before they do episode Left Behind, where Ellie's first
that'd be a
love,
bit weird.
and then like that whole tragedy around everything that happened there. I don't think they go too deep. I think it will just literally be breadcrumbs rather than anything else. And again, I think that when we get to episode 9 and we meet the Fireflies again, we may see breadcrumbs of something like,
But this is exactly why, because I know we're getting left behind, is why I think they made Sam 8 years old. Because nobody can ship Sam and Ellie. They can't say, oh, when they grow up, they'll, because people are like disgusting like that. They can't do that because it would just be too icky for a start if you'd like trying to ship an 8-year-old with however old Ellie's supposed to be, 14 or 15, whatever she is. But then it's not sensational when it turns out that Ellie is a lesbian. And I think one of the things they have shied away from is sensationalism. It wasn't sensational that Bill was gay. It was who is the girl? There was no girl. I know. Do you know what I mean? That's all it was. So if they'd made Sam older, this is what I was trying to say earlier in the bit where we weren't spoilering. If they'd made Sam older, it might have set him up as a love interest for Ellie. And that would then make the fact that she was lesbian a big shock horror sensational, and they've shied away from that. So I think they got it right making him younger.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with all that, like, so I think in terms of the future of the story, we'll probably get breadcrumbs rather than actual outright.
Yeah.
I think for various reasons, but there'll be enough there because they're now doing it. They're not, they made the first game without having written the second game and not even written the DLC, so they didn't know where it's going. Where now they've written all that in advance, so they know broadly where they're going. They can build these things into that narrative arc.
Yeah.
So I mean, that kind of begs onto my final question. Like, out of the last 4 episodes that are left, which one are you most looking forward to?
Left Behind.
Yeah,
The last one.
Oh,
It
nice.
it was close between Left Behind and the last one. It was really close, but I think it's just people are going to lose their shit at Left Behind.
Yeah.
They really are. They're absolutely going to lose their shit. And people who haven't seen the game are going to lose their shit at the last one. But
100%, yeah. But the amount of slaughtering that's going on, it's
But for me, I think it's more a tender thing that becomes just more horrific as it goes along.
Yeah.
With like Left Behind. I loved it as DLC. I thought it was incredibly done. And yeah, the idea that Ellie was at Fedra School and Riley went to the Fireflies. It's that opposing forces.
See,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to both those episodes. Sorry, do you want to, before I go off on a slight different take, do you want to...
I was just going to say that Left Behind episode will be probably the most beautiful one and the most standout, I think, in the season, just for how nice the story will be, I think.
Yeah.
And how it's played out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I am looking forward to Left Behind, and I am also looking forward to the finale and like, say, seeing Joel forced into making that choice, and then obviously the lie at the end and how it sort of is told, because I think that will, again, people who are not familiar with the story, that will be like a bombshell drop thing. But
yeah,
I'm actually most looking forward to episode 8 on the basis of how the game's elements in terms of enemies that they've done so far, they've taken them, particularly like the clicker and the bloater we've seen, they've taken them, which obviously quite scary enemies, but they're like relatively routine. After a point, you have to face more than one. They take them and they turn them into really well done horror moments. And I hope, I'm not 100% certain exactly how they'll do it, but I really hope they do that with David's story. If that's not like, just like ramp up the tension of this horror. Because when you play that in the game, obviously there's sort of this initial moment when you meet him and Ellie's slightly distrustful, but he's trying to be nice, like sort of he helps her survive in that situation, and then all of a sudden he reveals that he knows who she is and he's been hunting Joel, wanting revenge, but he wants to take her in, and he's got this sort of vision to be like kind of the way Joel is towards her, in a protector, but obviously in a lot more seedy and twisted and horrible kind of way. And then you have that final fight where you have to sneak around the restaurant, and like you've got this grown ass man trying to, and like she's just there. The opportunity for genuine horror tension, like
horror.
Yeah, not in a like the monsters around, like, but more in a like Friday the 13th sort of way. I think that's that kind of escape Michael Myers. The last, if they do that as I hope they do, then that will be fantastic. Hot in the throat the whole time, but that would be absolutely fantastic. And then of course once she gets to kill him, and then Joel finds him, Joel finds her. We get that heartbreak as well at the end. So just to keep in line with the Last of Us, every episode just giving us heartbreak.
Just smashed to pieces.
It's going to be
yeah.
We all turn into Henry in moments.
Yeah. Start with hope, get chewed up, spat out at the end. There you go. We'll see you next time.
Are you sad yet? It will be.
Oh, see, now we've seen when we first watched after the first couple of weeks, Phil and I agreed that when we'd seen them all, that we were going to have a marathon and just watch them all back to back as if they were a gigantic long movie.
Yeah, I do have to say, the adverts do ruin it for me. I don't know how. I don't know. Are you watching it on Now TV or are you watching it through like download? Because I do find you get to a certain point, you're like really deep into it, and then all of a sudden, boom,
Yeah.
advert, and like I kind of want to watch it where there's no interruptions, and as you say, all in one go with no adverts.
Yeah, so
That'd be...
Now TV gives you an advert at the start and at the end, but in the middle it just gives you like the logo where the ad break would be on Sky.
Yeah.
So it's bearable, but still annoying. It's still like
But now I'm thinking I might need to like front load a load of therapy and book a load for straight afterwards because I'm not sure I'll survive it otherwise.
No.
I'm not going to do it. But
yeah. It's getting us ready for part 2, though. I think that's the...
Like you're going into training, you need to like have like the screen going up with sporting montage music.
Well, that line from the Imagine Dragons song, "Oh, the misery."
God.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, should we watch Arcane again as well? Now you've mentioned that. Yeah, all right.
I think we should.
Yeah. So it's I'm looking forward to all of it, but especially Left Behind. I'm not in a rush to get to the end. I don't want it to be over like the first time you read a really good book.
I quite like it where it's come out one a week, not just dumped on you. And even in part 1, part 2, it's it's perfect for it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me on to chat shit about The Last of Us. It's been really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that brings us to the end. So that's going to be everything for this week. But before we go, Will, if you want to mention where people can find you and if anything coming up to look forward to.
Yeah, everyone can find me on pretty much every social media as Resident Evil Central. I'm now starting to get back into the streaming side of things. It's been neglected kind of bit. So tomorrow I'll be jumping back in, finishing off Last Days Lazarus, giving away a copy, and then starting a new game. And then I've got just behind me there, you can see the game Flavor Drinks. We've got samples there, so I'll be doing the food bits this week as well, where I'll be creating the Resident Evil inspired food to go along with it, and then the community will vote what's their favourite.
Nice. And Dee, where can people find you, and what are you working on? Anything interesting at the moment?
You can find me sitting in a dark corner sobbing about Bill and Frank. But apart from that, they can find me on my YouTube, which is youtube.com/ddickens. I do have to warn you that my content is not suitable for people who are under 18 because I am, at the end of the day, a sex blogger. I have a blog called Duct Tape and Daddy Issues. .blogger.com, and it's educational. It's not just filthy. We just have filthy on a Friday. Because you've got to have a bit of filth for the weekend. Like, see what all the fuss is about. How does he walk around with that thing? It was very like on the money for me. So they can find me there, or on my YouTube channel. There's also links to my poetry, which is suitable for younger viewers. What I'm doing is basically writing about filth and still being sexual when you're older and disabled. And if people want to see me, then look for me where the sun rises. No, I'm being silly now.
Yeah.
But thanks again for having me on. It's been really good.
Oh, well, thanks to you. Thanks to both of you for coming on. It's been fun, and make sure you check out the links in the description for everything where you can find our guests, and make sure you show them some support and some love. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all of my content, including future episodes of this podcast, other videos on The Last of Us and Resident Evil and horror games, and my live streams where I'm doing whole game permadeath runs of The Last of Us Part 1 and 2. And I will also be this weekend, no, the weekend after, doing raising money for charity for Special Effect to help disabled gamers with providing equipment that helps them to overcome physical impairments to be able to play the games that they love. Check out the links in the description to join my Patreon for as little as £1 per month, or donate to my GoFundMe. Get your name in the credits of my videos, like those at the end of this video, who I want to thank, as ever, for supporting me and my content. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.